I'm going to have a look at the hours factors. So in this example I've loaded up a BC317 impeller hours project specifically for this tutorial or exercise. Now this shows the areas and weights. So we can see on this list that we've got some hours here. So these are manufacturing hours rather than drawing hours. So we've got these codes. On the left here, I is for impeller. Now one of the things we can do is we can highlight all these rows with the code I for impeller. So I'll just drag the mouse down and highlight all those. Then I will right click and we can see the total manufacturing hours for this particular impeller is 40.59. So I might just take a screenshot to remind me of what that is. I'll just take a screenshot of that little bit there. Okay, that's saved. So let's now close that and we'll open up the Centrix price utility. So I'm already looking at hours factors here. Let's just close that. And this is under hours factors. So we click on that. And I'm looking at the BC317 for this example. So I'll just single click on that. And we can scroll down and see other model names and IDs. So the IDs here are model IDs and there is no need to try and change any of those. In fact, doing so could cause problems. So I'll double click the BC317 and that brings up the factor IDs. Now these aren't factors themselves, they are IDs. So if I want to change the hours on this impeller, I'll double click the impeller factor IDs and you can see we have a range of sizes, so oversize up to and including size. So we want to make sure we don't have any holes in this range. You can see that these two line up in value, so we won't have any holes, otherwise we could have a factor of 0 maybe. Now you'll notice that although this says 1, we've got more than 1 here. This shows all the different IDs that can be used for impellers anywhere. For example, if I look at the OX495, by double clicking here, you can see that that's using 1 again. And if we double click that, it's exactly the same table. So let's go back to our BC317. I'll double click that again and I will double click that again. Now I'm going to increase those hours by a factor of 50%. So this covers the range 0 to 2000 millimeters. Again, this is just for our exercise here. I might want to say, let's take that to 4000. So that will cover all fan sizes, and when I say size, the size is the diameter over the blades, and it's not, even when you come to the casing factors, it shows size, all the sizes, unless it states otherwise, relate to the diameter over the blades. So, back to our BC317, impeller factor ID. I'm now going to change that to increase by 50%. I'm not going to do anything with the speed rings at this stage. They are separate factors. So you could even have an impeller factor of 1 and an inner speed ring factor of say 2. So that when Centrix does its calculation for hours, the hours that Centrix calculates for adding an inner speed ring would be then multiplied by this factor of whatever, 2, 1.5, 0.7, whatever you want to put there. Alright, so To apply this, I'm going to click back here. Actually, I'm going to move off because this makes life easier. So I'll double click 6 and I'm going to change that. Sorry, I'm going to change that to 3. You'll notice if I double click that, if this table is open, it is harder to change that to one of these numbers. So it's better to go off it with a single click, go back on with a single click and then enter 3, then move off it again. Now that should be applied, and you can check that simply by going to the next one down and then back onto it and double clicking, and you'll see that it stayed at 3. So that should now be applied in the database. So let's go back to Centrix. Now, we loaded up that project, and if we look at the quote, it will combine these codes to give a final price. So let's just have a look at the quote, and the impeller is coming up with a sell price of 5,301. Okay, so let's now go back and we'll open the project again, which is the BC317 impeller hours. The hours, so let's, for the impeller, so let's highlight those again. So now we see the total manufacturing hours has increased from what it was before of 40.59 to 55.59. Now it's not gone up by a factor of 50% in total, because if we look at the impeller design, we can see that it has inner and outer speed rings. To get a 50% increase in the total hours, we would need to apply the same factor for the inner speed ring and the outer speed ring, and even the full speed ring. And we can have also factors. Remember, these are factors unless stated otherwise. We can have factors for a fabricated hub, and we can add some actual hours rather than factors. So the impeller drawing hours for this is currently set at 0, and there's no extra drawing hours, or extra drawing hours. So these can be 0, or they can be whatever you want. So let's now go back to here. I'll double click that again. We can see that those values are what we've said they should be. So I'll go back into Centrix and I'll load this project again. So it's loading up, getting to our areas and hours, and let's just see what we have now. And now we've virtually added 50% onto the hours. So that's how this works. So just looking at some of these other hours. So we've got a casing factor. Again, we've got some extra entries here. You have to be careful that you set these to what you want. So your version of Centrix should always default to 1. So you'd find that all these factors along here will be 1 until you change them. And we can have a look at maybe assembly factors. So it's always good to just drag some of these column widths out if you're not sure if it's a factor or hours. Engineering hours. You can see that these are actual hours. So you can configure these. Again, we've got size ranges, and we can simply enter a new ID here with our own size ranges. They don't have to match these particular size ranges. And put in new hours. We've got flanges that are based on the actual size of the flange rather than a fan size. And we've got a material factor as well here, which is generally 1. Same for the inlet flange. We've also got the number of flanges that go into the inlet for a standard inlet. So some inlet cones, for example, are sandwiched between a number of flanges, so that's where you would put more than one flange here. Split flanges, again that's a factor. So you can go through and configure all these. Remember that most of these are using the same. I've changed the impeller factor to 3 for this BC317 in this example. That doesn't affect any of the other fans, but if you wanted to, you could just say, let's use the impeller factor 3 for the OX495 as well. So as I say, it's a good idea just to do a check to make sure you're going to get what you expect by just closing the hours, opening it again, double clicking the ID to make sure it's 3, and there we are. That finishes this tutorial on hours factors.